Now, they are the ones begging for mercy. Karoline Leavitt had handled tough interviews before. She was no stranger to pushback, especially from liberal media. But this time felt different. This wasn't just a political debate or a heated exchange. It was a deliberate attack. She had been invited onto the talk show under the pretense of discussing policy. That was the premise they gave her. However, the moment she sat down, she sensed a shift in the room's energy. The tension wasn't the usual clash of differing opinions. It felt like an ambush. Before we dive back into the story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. Tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. At first, the questions seemed standard, even predictable. Then, without warning, one of the hosts leaned forward, their voice carrying more than just skepticism. Let's be real, Karoline. You're not here because of your qualifications. You're here because of loyalty. That's the only reason you got this job, isn't it? The audience reacted instantly. Gasps, murmurs, a few stifled laughs. Karoline's expression remained steady, but inside, she recognized the moment for what it was. This wasn't an interview anymore. It was a spectacle, and she was the target. She took a slow, measured breath. Losing her composure was exactly what they wanted. I'm here because I've earned my place. If you disagree, let's talk about policy, not personal attacks. But policy wasn't what they wanted. They wanted a reaction. Another host smirked, glancing at the audience before delivering the next blow. Earned or handed? Because from where we're sitting, it looks like loyalty is the only real qualification these days. This time, the audience clapped. Karoline saw through it immediately. The segment had been scripted, the lines rehearsed. This wasn't a discussion. It was an attempt to humiliate her. Over the next few minutes, she was met with constant interruptions, dismissive laughter, and loaded questions designed to make her look incompetent. No matter what she said, they twisted, reframed, or ignored it. This wasn't about a fair exchange of ideas. It was about control. But she refused to crumble. She stood her ground, responded with facts, and didn't allow them to push her into an emotional reaction. Then, just as the segment was wrapping up, one of the hosts went for the final strike. Women like you set us back. You're a pawn, and deep down you know it. Silence. Even the audience hesitated, unsure of how to react. Karoline clenched her jaw, not out of anger, but from something deeper. A realization. They weren't attacking her because they believed their own words. They were attacking her because they were afraid. She smiled, slow, deliberate. If standing up for my beliefs makes me a pawn, then so be it. At least I'm not a puppet. The segment ended. The cameras stopped rolling. The damage was done, or so they thought. What they didn't anticipate was the reaction that followed. The clip spread online like wildfire. Within hours, it was everywhere. Twitter, YouTube, conservative news outlets. The networks scrambled, attempting to control the narrative. They edited the segment, framed it as just another heated political debate, and pushed their usual headlines. But it wasn't enough. The full, unedited footage was out, and it told a very different story. Conservatives weren't just upset, they were outraged. Comment sections exploded with accusations of media bias, double standards, and outright bullying. Even those who weren't Karoline's strongest supporters couldn't deny what they had seen. They hadn't debated her. They had attacked her. Hashtags took over social media. Hashtag media bias hashtag stand with Karoline hashtag cancel the show. Republican politicians weighed in. Conservative commentators dissected the exchange, breaking it down frame by frame. Even some liberals, uncomfortable with how far the hosts had gone, admitted it was a bad look. But the backlash didn't stop there. The show's sponsors started getting tagged in posts. Viewers weren't just angry, they were strategic. They bombarded advertisers with messages questioning why they were supporting a platform that openly degraded women who didn't align with their politics. Some companies tried to stay silent. Others released vague statements. Then, one of the show's biggest sponsors pulled out. Their carefully worded statement avoided controversy but made one thing clear: they didn't want to be associated with divisive and unprofessional discourse. That was the first domino. The rest followed quickly. The network scrambled into damage control. Anonymous sources leaked reports of panic behind the scenes, executives demanding explanations, frantic meetings on how to regain control. At first, the show's hosts stayed silent. Then, they released a weak statement about passionate discussions and differing perspectives. But it was too late. Karoline had yet to speak publicly. She didn't need to. The rumors had already started. Whispers spread. She was preparing a lawsuit. And not just for defamation. The legal case would argue targeted harassment, professional harm, and possibly even coordinated media misconduct. The network had faced backlash before. They had weathered controversies. But this was different. In a dimly lit office in Washington, D.C., Karoline sat across from her legal team. Stacks of documents lay on the table, some still warm from the printer. The stakes were clear. This wasn't about a viral moment or a political argument. It was about accountability. A senior attorney, a no-nonsense woman with years of media litigation experience, set her pen down and leaned back. The defamation angle is strong. But we can also argue professional harm. This wasn't just criticism. It was an orchestrated attempt to discredit you. Karoline listened intently. She wasn't someone who rushed into lawsuits. But this time was different. This time, it wasn't just about her feelings. It was about setting a precedent. The more her team investigated, the worse it got. Internal emails surfaced. Leaked messages between producers and staff revealed that the segment had been planned from the start, not as an interview, but as an exposure piece. One line stood out: "Make sure she stumbles. Cut her off if she gets too comfortable. Let's play a little game." For those reading the comments, type Coca-Cola in the comments. Only those who get to this point will understand. That wasn't journalism. That was an ambush. By the next morning, news broke. Karoline Leavitt was officially suing the network. The response was immediate and chaotic. The network's lawyers rushed to issue statements, calling the lawsuit frivolous and a desperate political stunt. But it was too late. Because this lawsuit wasn't just about Karoline anymore. It was about media ethics. As certain voices were treated unfairly on national platforms, the backlash intensified. More advertisers pulled out, the show's ratings plummeted, and viewers across the political spectrum began asking the same question. If they had nothing to hide, why were they scrambling? Then, something unexpected happened. A former producer came forward, anonymously at first, then publicly. In an exclusive interview, she confirmed what many had long suspected. The show had a history of coordinating attacks against conservative guests. Producers were instructed to push them into uncomfortable moments, cut them off, mock them subtly, and manipulate the edit. She provided emails, memos, and even unedited footage from past interviews, clips that made it clear what happened to Karoline wasn't an accident. It was standard practice. Suddenly, this wasn't just a lawsuit, it was an exposé. And the network, they were running out of ways to spin it. Inside the network's headquarters, the atmosphere was suffocating. Executives barked orders, legal teams huddled over conference tables, and PR specialists scrambled to craft the perfect damage control statement. They had handled controversies before, but this wasn't just another bad press cycle. This was a full-scale crisis. The leaked emails, the former producer's testimony, the advertisers fleeing, and now Karoline's lawsuit was gaining momentum. The network released an official statement, but it fell flat. "We stand by our commitment to free and open discussion. While we regret any misunderstanding, we maintain that our hosts acted within the bounds of spirited debate." It was a carefully worded non-apology, and it only made things worse. Viewers saw right through it. By the next morning, the show's social media pages were in freefall. Comments were turned off, dislikes skyrocketed, and more advertisers severed ties, issuing vague statements about re-evaluating partnerships. The message was clear. Corporate sponsors didn't want the heat. Then came the first major internal casualty. One of the show's lead producers resigned. The press release framed it as a mutual decision, but insiders leaked the truth. They were trying to contain the fire. But it was too late. The legal proceedings had officially begun. Karoline's team subpoenaed internal records, searching for more proof of coordinated media bias and targeted defamation. What they found was worse than anyone had expected. More emails, more memos, more undeniable proof that the network wasn't just reporting news, they were manipulating it. Then came the biggest bombshell yet. A second former employee stepped forward. This time, it wasn't just about the talk show. It was about the entire network. They alleged that this wasn't an isolated incident. Certain guests were strategically discredited, shut down, and ridiculed to fit a pre-approved narrative. Suddenly, Karoline's case wasn't just about her. It was about the credibility of the entire media institution. As the legal battle escalated, the network had to face a chilling reality. They weren't just fighting Karoline anymore. They were fighting the truth. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled every available seat, their cameras and notebooks ready to capture every detail. Outside, the scene was even more chaotic. Protesters, supporters, media vans lined up for blocks. This wasn't just a lawsuit. It had become a cultural battleground. Karoline sat beside her attorneys, calm but focused. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment. The network's legal team was formidable, but she knew they weren't just defending themselves against her. They were defending their own past mistakes. The trial began with opening arguments. Karoline's lawyers laid it out plainly. This case isn't about political differences. It's about media accountability. Our client was targeted, discredited, and professionally harmed, not through honest journalism, but through calculated deception. Then came the evidence. The leaked emails, the producer's testimony, the unedited footage from past interviews that revealed a clear pattern of coordinated bias. Each piece tightened the noose around the network. Their defense team fought back, arguing that heated debate was normal and that Karoline was simply playing the victim. But then, the former producer took the stand. She testified under oath that producers were given pre-show instructions to ensure conservative guests never came out looking strong. And when she read one particular email aloud, the entire courtroom went silent. Do not let her finish full sentences. Keep control. Mock lightly. Make her lose credibility. That single line shattered any illusion that the interview had been fair. The network's attorneys tried to argue that the show's format was entertainment, not journalism. They claimed guests should expect tough questioning. Karoline's attorneys countered with something even stronger, a video montage. A direct comparison of how liberal guests were treated versus how conservatives were treated. One side showed respectful interviews, uninterrupted responses, and softball questions. The other? Constant interruptions, sarcasm, mockery, cheap shots disguised as debate. The jury watched in silence. The contrast was undeniable. Then came the financial records. Karoline's team presented data proving that her reputation had suffered measurable damage. Speaking engagements cancelled, opportunities withdrawn, a deliberate attempt to silence her. At that moment, the case shifted. This wasn't just a media controversy anymore. This was a reckoning. As closing arguments wrapped up, the jury had only one question to answer. Had the network crossed the line? The entire country waited for the verdict. The jury's decision came faster than expected. When the judge re-entered the courtroom, everyone held their breath. Karoline sat still, hands folded in her lap. The network's legal team, once confident, now looked drained. The foreperson stood. In the matter of defamation and professional harm, we, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff, Karoline Leavitt. Gasps. Murmurs. A few stunned expressions. Karoline closed her eyes for a brief moment, exhaling as the weight of the past few months finally lifted. The damages were significant. A multi-million-dollar settlement. A public admission of wrongdoing. The network was forced to issue a formal apology, not just to Karoline, but to every guest who had been subjected to their tactics. But the fallout didn't stop there. The show was officially cancelled. The network framed it as a restructuring decision, but everyone knew the truth. Advertisers weren't coming back. The brand was too toxic. More employees came forward. More unethical practices were exposed. This wasn't just a loss for the network. It was a turning point for political media. And Karoline? Her career didn't just survive, it thrived. She became a symbol of pushing back against media manipulation. Book deals, speaking engagements, a stronger platform than ever. But she didn't use it to gloat. Instead, she left the public with this. It's not about silencing people you disagree with. It's about accountability. The media isn't supposed to manufacture reality. It's supposed to report it. And that was a message no one could ignore.